Hello and welcome to the Employment Law Update for the academic year 2022 to 2023. As always, if you are a student who is going to be studying employment law this year, then do check out the link in the description to this video. It will take you to my Gumroad page, and in particular the full set of courses on employment law, where you will be able to find all of the materials that you will need to pass the employment law module and hopefully also get a first class mark. Anyway, let's get started with some of the key updates from the past year and some of the possible updates that will be happening in the coming year. One of the main news stories that has been dominating the headlines during the summer of 2022 has been ongoing strike action across a number of sectors. Within the legal profession, we've obviously been talking about the strike by the Criminal Bar Association, but for an employment law purpose, it's also important to remember the other strikes, such as those by the rail workers' unions. Now, the response from the government has really been about restraining the ability of strikers and limiting their effectiveness. So we saw in July 2022 the Conduct of Employment Agencies and Employment Businesses Amendment Regulations, which is a very lengthy title for a relatively short piece of legislation, which essentially said that striking workers can be replaced with agency workers. The government at the time also talked about introducing other proposals as well, so it will be worth sort of looking out to see if these do become law within the next year as well. And those have included maintaining minimum staffing in industries that are key to national infrastructure, so that would be things like the railways, limiting the pickets around also pieces of infrastructure as well, so around railway stations you might be having a limit on pickets to 6 people. Also raising the minimum vote in favour of strikes and banning strikes by different unions in the same workplace within set periods. There's also been talk about other things such as cool-off periods between strikes as well. So that's been the response by the government. It would be interesting to see if the Liz Truss government follows in this same direction. These were proposals that were brought forward by the previous Transport Secretary, so we'll see if that actually continues on. One of the other key areas that always affects employment law is 0 hours workers, and there has been a ban since 2015 on exclusivity clauses in 0 hours contracts. In other words, if you're on a 0 hours contract, it used to be the case that an employer could still limit if you could do work for other employers, even though you might actually work 0 hours during a week for that single employer. So those were banned in 2015, and there's been talk about renewing that ban within 2022 as well. So that looks like something that will continue. The questions around 0 hours workers has also been continuing. This has been since the case of Uber and Aslam, which is kind of like the seminal case on this subject. How do we define who is a worker and who is an employee? And within that regard, Deliveroo looks like it could be going to the Supreme Court, and there's going to be more case law on this subject. So definitely, if you're an employment law student, it's going to be important that you look at the headlines and keep an eye out on some of that key case law in this area. Also, every year there tends to be pay rises on a number of statutory schemes, so always worth looking at these. These tend to change around every April. So these are the updates for 2022. Sick pay at £99.35, national minimum wage at £9.50 an hour, and statutory pay, that's for things like parental leave, at £156.66. These will probably change again and probably go up quite significantly given the rate of inflation at the moment in April 2023. So if you're answering a problem question and you're being asked to deal with specific figures, then this is always something that's worth bearing in mind. There's also been some significant case law over the past year. One of the most famous cases that generated a lot of headlines was Forstater and CGD Europe from 2022. Now, this was an ongoing case from the employment tribunals, and this was really an employment tribunal confirming a previous decision. You might have read about it because it's about whether an employee was discriminated against on the basis of her beliefs. And her beliefs were gender critical, what some regarded as transphobic beliefs, and the employment tribunal found in her favour And we're probably going to see a lot of these cases that are engaged around the culture war and whether someone is a TERF, which I think is trans-exclusionary radical feminist, those sorts of terms which get thrown around. And I think we're going to see a lot more of these types of cases, especially as the issues around them tend to generate headlines around the UK. One of the other cases was Harper Trust and Brazell, and this case went to the Supreme Court earlier on this year. In fact, I covered it on the podcast, so if you would like to find out more, then do search for the UK Law Weekly podcast on your podcatcher of choice. To essentially give the broad details, this was about holiday pay and how it should be worked out. So it's going to affect a number of industries, so do listen to the podcast if you get a chance to, and you can find out more there. Well, thank you very much for watching this annual employment law update. I hope you found it useful. Employment law is always one of those areas where it generates a lot of headlines, whether it's proposed legislative reforms or a case that tends to be going through the courts. So it's worth keeping your ear to the ground, whether that's looking in the newspapers or other legal commentary. If you are an employment law student, then do remember to check out the link in the description to this video. It will take you to my Gumroad page, and from there you can purchase the full employment law course, which will cover all of the topics that you're likely to see on an employment law module. Anyway, I'll be back with more videos soon, but for now, bye!